Yeah. But from the get-go, all you'll hear is, well, I'll never forget this. It can't work, won't work, doesn't bind to the androgen receptor. And I
Right.
just thought to myself, geez,
Jerry Brainham's take. I heard that.
yeah, exactly.
I love Jerry. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, yeah.
It's just does anyone contest the fact that creatine works? No. Does it work through the androgen receptor? No. And I'll tell you
Right.
what, Vigorous Steve put out, I don't know if it was a current YouTube video or not, about maximizing all of the different anabolic pathways, not just the
Yep.
androgen receptor.
Yep. Hit it from all the angles.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so the question today is not does it work? It's how many mechanisms does it work through? Because there's at least three and probably more.
Well, and
So
yeah, and do you want to go just because what I plan to do with this is edit it down and then I'll run it by you before I put anything out. But for the viewers, would you like to just do a quick breakdown of the three pathways or that you know of or
well, I mean the latest one that people have been talking about, right, are the estrogen beta receptor,
mm-hmm.
And then the biophytist who's working on the pharmaceutical 20 hydroxyecdysterone, which has made it, by the way, further in trials for sarcopenia than any other drug, including testosterone growth hormone.
Nice.
For various reasons.
Nice.
They seem to think it's a mast receptor, works through the mast receptor. And to my mind, also, mTOR, everything stimulates mTOR seemingly. But I personally feel that it works through membrane. It's incorporated into the cell membrane and is somehow working through that mechanism and others to affect the ribosome. And that's in the ribosome, as you know, that's where new muscle proteins are constructed, right? So unlike steroids, which dock at the androgen receptor and send a message to the cell nucleus to turn on protein machinery, ecdysterone goes directly to the ribosome and it increases the rate of messenger RNA translation.
Okay.
And again, that's one of many, I think, pathways that we're going to find.
Mm-hmm.
So, to those people out there that say it doesn't work, I would tell you there's ample evidence that they're wrong. That it works through at least 3, possibly 6 or more pathways. And it's more a question of they're comparing it to anabolics. So it's not does it work? It's does it work to the degree I want it to?
Right.
Does it work like Tren? No. Does it, given the cost to benefit ratio, that's a personal thing. I don't know.
Well, and what are the costs from Tren when you got to go back and get a statin now, and now you got to do this, and there's your cost for Tren really, or the breakup that you had while you were on it, the relationship destroyer it's called. And I hate to admit it, but I can attest to that one. So, but back in the day, so.
I've heard guys describe it as divorce in a bottle.
Right, divorce in a bottle. There you go. Well, let me throw this out here before I forget. I was just thinking about what you just said today. I thought to myself, think about it like this. If we were only able to get 1 milligram of testosterone into the system at one time, if the best injection we could take would equal like 0.86 milligrams, right? Everybody would think that testosterone was weak as could be. But the fact is we can inject a 0.5 gram at a time if we want, and so we think it's powerful. The problem with ecdysterone, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when it really first started to be looked at in the supplement industry 20 years ago, the concentrates of it, I don't think, were really even reaching higher than 18, 20% because we had like a natural amount and then it was slowly reduced in the plant material. And even moving forward, I can get a hold of a verifiable 90% concentrate consistently. In fact, I just ordered, that's what I had to run out and do before this meeting was order another kilogram. But So I took some shopping. I went through about 5 or 6 suppliers before I was able to find one that works. I have my own little testing methods, and it's anyway. If it gives, yeah. Anyway, long story, but the thing is even fast forward to today, up until recently, I think most products, or up until the last 10 years or so, most products were just eking out a small amount, and there wasn't a high amount of absorption or bioavailability. So that's the thing that I was trying to tackle was let's give a large amount of ecdysterone in the product, but also let's make sure that we're matching adjusted for dose the studies that we've seen in rats and stuff. So my theory was if we could get 80 milligrams into the system per day, and so if we convert that from whatever percentage we're getting, then we could do a comparison to the studies and see what happens. And once, when I got to that point where I was getting that much in, it's undeniable. Like what you're taking now is right in line with what those studies were doing, and you're seeing the results from it. So,
Yeah, it really wasn't until the mid 1980s that the interest in the compound itself started to snowball.
okay.
Mid 1960s, they identified 20-hydroxyecdysterone and ecdysone, but just those two.
Okay.
And as you know, today there are 578, I think.
Oh my! I didn't realize it was that much. That's wild. Yeah.
If you go to ecdybase.org,
okay,
that is a database that is maintained by Rene Lafont, and he works for Biophytus, which I found very interesting.
Okay.
Because as does a fellow named Rene Denon.
Okay.
And they published a landmark paper 20 years ago about ecdysterone and what it did and its effects in mammals, including humans. And so they've gone out and got the top brains in for this. And it really wasn't until recently that the quality stuff, so to speak, was available at a reasonable price.
Yes.
Just give you,
yes.
Just give you some idea. If you could find 20-hydroxyecdysterone in the early 1980s, it was on the order of about $2,000 a gram.
Oof. Yeah.
Maybe it's 20. I can't remember.
Yeah, but still, it's insane. Yeah.
It's absurd. Whereas today, you can get a kilo for about $1,000.
Yeah.
And so, and I have many thoughts on whether or not that's the optimal ecdysterone. But the point being, it has only been recently, I would say within the last decade, that it's become commercially viable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not just my opinion. Biophytus has published papers saying the same thing.
Well, and that's my background with this doesn't go as far back as yours, but I can trace it back maybe to the late 90s is when I first heard about it. And at that time, that was the sentiment going around the underground forums, was that what we had available just wasn't, we're not getting the kind of percentages and stuff that we needed to see. And like you're saying, it just wasn't commercially viable. And I think that 20 years ago, that put a bad taste in people's mouths. And so when it came around again, people are, well, I don't know, this didn't work 20 years ago, but it's not the same concentrations even remotely. This is a lot more actual sterones in the product these days. So.
Yeah, ironically enough, in the U.S. market, it was first introduced in the West in the late 1980s by a company called Athletica.
Okay.
And they specialized on importing legitimate Russian compounds, I'll call them, such as ecdysterone and 6-methyluracil. And they had the very first low molecular weight hydrolyzed proteins, 400 daltons, stuff like this.
Okay, yeah.
But needless to say, the original product was called Revibol, their original product.
Right.
It was the real stuff, and it worked fantastic.
Huh.
And so what did this cause? It caused a lot of copycat companies to go looking for the stuff, and they either had wood chips in there.
Yeah, fiber.
Or an extremely extremely weak version. And the product, unfortunately, got a bad reputation as a result of that.
Yep.
And that's where you kind of have that
Stigma.
opinion.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's snake oil. My response to that would be biotech companies that are publicly held don't spend tens of millions of dollars on compounds that aren't going to return for their investment.
Right. And just to back you up on that, you're talking about the company that's studying this, and they're in Europe, right? The one that's really doing this.
They have offices, I think, in France and right outside of Boston. I can't.
Oh, okay. Well, and I'm not trying to tell tales out of school. He's commented various times on my videos and stuff, but one of Greg Doucette's researchers that he uses as an advisor to test the products and stuff like that is a young guy, extremely intelligent, extremely good shape, and never flaunts it. And just, the opposite of me, in other words, right? The opposite of he's a sleeper build. So but his name is Marwan, and he was just one of the most genuine. He's been following this closely, and he had, he's got ties to universities and stuff over in Europe. And so when it came time to test after the whole, Greg Doucette, more plates, more dates, Ecdysterone debacle a couple of years ago, he was taken on to make sure that they're getting the good stuff. And so as much as people may not like Greg, I understand his personality can be grating to people, but behind the scenes, what I've seen from his researcher is that he is, the researcher is very dedicated. And that's what he was talking about, was this company that's going through the clinical trials and all the stuff that's going on. So I just wanted to, from another, you're not just pulling this out of the air. This is really going on. Other people, that are serious medical students and researchers are on this too. So.
Right. And the Russians have been studying it, since the early 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
Real Ecdysterone has been around for over a decade, available only the good stuff through the Institute of Chemistry and Plant Sciences in Uzbekistan, ICPS.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if they're using ICPS material, but my point is it's been around for a long time. So I knew what it was, what it could do, what it couldn't do. But I've seen that gentleman speaking, and yes, he's exceptionally well spoken. He knows his stuff.
Yeah.
And he's lending credibility to the fact that, look, folks, this is a legitimate compound whose time has come.
Right. And I would 100% agree. And people will ask me, hey, will I get testosterone-like effects? And I try to explain it to them. Just because it has stone in the name doesn't mean we're going to have the same. I equate it to the sledgehammer effect and the precision hammer effect. We're... like my product Ecdyboost, I called it that because I thought that'll help people understand that this is a snowball cumulative effect over time, to where it's giving you help with your digestion, it's giving you help with blood flow to the muscles, with oxygen, all these kind of things. And over time, and the stimulation of the estrogen, the E2 receptor. So over time, that support, for example, I'm 45, I had to think about it. I'm 45. I've been training consistently since 2001. In 2001, I weighed 142 pounds. I'm 6'2". So I was everybody's, are you sick? Are you sick? No, I felt fine. I'm just scrawny. And so I started training then, and I've been training for 23 years now, or whatever it is. And I thought my gaining days were done. I'm on TRT. I don't use steroids anymore. I don't use any big cycles or anything like that. I play around with what you see on my channel. But it's been a decade and a half since I've, So I've put on, I would say, 10 to 12 legitimate lean stage weight pounds in the last year and a half from Ecdysterone. I mean, don't get me wrong. And my training is on point. My diet is okay for what it is. But I know myself, and I've been training forever, a quarter of a century. And I know what to expect. And so in the last year and a half, I've just been pleasantly surprised, pleasantly surprised. Everything that I would have done that would have gained me a little tiny bit of progress has gained me reasonable, good progress. And and my health is better. My health markers are better. When I get my heart work done, they look at, the EKG and all everything's good. Everything's better than it was 3 years ago. So it slightly, I'm getting older, but it is actually improved with age. Now that's the convincing to me that just makes it, so.
100% agree. I've been using it, like I said, in various forms for 30 years. I'm 54 now.
Okay. Yep.
I had a calcium screen, I think 2 years ago, which looks for blockages or
right, and the aortas and yeah.
Yeah, so the scale goes from 0 to 400. 0 being, nothing. They can't find anything to 400. I came back with a 0, and the doc couldn't believe it. He reran the test because he said, somebody your age, that it's your size. I'm not a huge guy, but I'm 235 or something.
Right.
He said, I would have certainly thought we'd see something at least in teens or 20. So my point there being is, it is an exceptionally safe, and I do believe, health-promoting compound.
That's the thing.
What's not to like, right?
Right. It takes the health markers in the opposite direction of what you would expect, and that's just what blew my mind. It kind of started me off down this path, was just realizing we don't have to kill ourselves for fitness. We can actually get healthier while we get fitter. That's just what a concept, right? So,
and you know what? People need to understand that if you put your mind to it and your heart into it and enough time, and I'm talking decades, we came from the same place. I was 6 foot 143 when I started. I got to 252.
Right.
252 was nothing but creatine, and that was brand new at the time. It was maybe 5 pounds.
Right.
But these compounds, Ecdysterone, and I refer to it as compounds because it's really a family of compounds.
That's right.
Plants.
Yep.
Just like anabolic steroids, right? On one end, you've got testosterone. It's the most natural. It belongs in your body. Who knows what to do with it?
Very good way to put it.
On the other end, you got tren.
Yep.
And so there's a very wide, swath of variations, and they have various effects. In Ecdy's case, there don't seem to be any downsides. I can't find one for anyone.
Right. I'm sorry, one moment. I'm on this free Zoom, and they're giving me a 10-minute warning. So I'm just gonna, when that hits, I'll let you know, and then we'll just reset. I apologize. This must be a new thing. So. Okay, sorry about that. Go on. So you were saying that, it's a family of compounds, and this is what I try to explain to people about turkesterone and ecdysterone. A lot of people have asked me, do you have straight turkesterone? And I said, no, and neither does anybody else that's on the broader stage here. There's a little bit of turkesterone in my Ecdy product. There's more in Greg's right now. He's using a different, the different plant source. But what I try to tell people is look at the literature. The turkesterone was found to be about 11% more potent than the ecdysterone, and there's a few other ones in the middle there that are more potent than ecdy and somewhere between that and turk and different things. So it's just a variety of compounds, and I believe they work best when combined, but that's just my experience. But
100% spot on. I have said for decades that a concentrated extract retaining all of the plant's ecdysterone in the ratios that nature has put in there and intended leads to far better effects, especially for athletic, application than any individual isolated ecdysterone. You can look at the literature and get real excited about turkesterone, cyasterone, ribrosterone, 20-hydroxyecdysterone. But Lafont himself, and I found a paper that he and Dodon wrote, another one, has said multiple times the same thing. It's the best, the ideal, if you will, is retaining the ecdysterones in the ratios and amounts, they are in the source genus plant. So if you're using Roponticum carcinoids extract, it contains a very specific complex of ecdysterones, referred to as the lead-scenes complex. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I hadn't.
It's a grouping of ecdysterones, depending upon whose literature that you read, 10 to 12 in very, very specific ratios.
Okay.
And there was a test that was done years ago, and I think Sirov did this at the Institute of Chemistry and Plant Sciences in Uzbekistan. Well, I can send it to you. Basically, the forced swimming test.
Okay.
And so they gave these rats isolated individual ecdysterones, and the best of them swam 35, 40% longer than control.
Right.
However, when they gave them, the full suite of ecdysterones, they swam 50% longer.
Yep. Well, and let me relate my personal, if you don't care. I there's a company called botany.bio or science.bio.
Yeah.
And these days they're a little stricter with their payment process, and I just am too lazy to order, which may sound bad, but they have an ecdysterone product that they were very, very tight with. And when all this turkesterone stuff went about a couple years ago, theirs was tested and found to be about 98% pure 20-hydroxy ecdysterone, or ecdysone, So I ordered some from them, and I made an injectable out of it. And then I also made an injectable out of the 90% blend. And I compared the two, and I wasn't going into it with any preconceived notions. We're talking, this is my first experiences with just formulating and figuring it out. And it was clear as day. What you just outlined there was that it was more potent when there was a blend. I got a better pump. There was more effects. And their product was amazing. It's pure, it's clean. It was easy to make an injectable because there's no leftover plant matter. Everything's been filtered out. With mine, I actually have to triple filter it and make sure that everything's just so. But yeah, just to confirm on anecdotal, that was my personal experience. Putting it right in my body, I can say yes, that's how it was. Definitely a better pump from the other, and yeah.
It's interesting that Biophytus is using a purified 20-hydroxyecdysterone. But if you read in their studies and their literature, they will tell you up front, it's not necessarily because it's the best one, that they could find. It is the easiest to extract from plants.
Right.
Synthesizing it is prohibitively expensive, so they needed something that they could extract, and purify, and they said, look, if we start adding other ecdysterones to this, that means tens of millions of dollars in additional pharmacodynamic studies,
right?
The safety of it, etc.
We got to pinpoint this down to one compound so that when the patent's written, when the studies are written, we know this relates back to this specific. Yeah, that makes, from a medical perspective, you got to be, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's not ideal, but it works. And they've got the data to show it.
Well, and if it works 90%, we're good, right? It's better than